The hospital was full. It was raining outside. The dark car that drove right up to the steps stopped. "Back up," the guard said. He waved his hand. Lily glared at him angrily. She bit her lip, then backed up and pulled away. "Parking for who, you stupid?" the old man said angrily. He was tired of everyone who drove up to the hospital wanting to drive right into the building. At the entrance to the hospital, through the glass doors, Lily could see a spacious hallway decorated with light green walls. In the center of the lobby was a wide reception desk with several nurses working behind it. They were taking patients in quickly and efficiently, giving them referrals and answering questions. Next to the registration desk was a small stand with information about the hospital, as well as a cozy waiting area with cushioned chairs and tables. To the right of the entrance was a large restroom for doctors where they could relax after a hard day's work. There were comfortable sofas and armchairs, and paintings with landscapes and portraits hung on the walls. The room also had a small table with a kettle and cups for doctors to drink tea or coffee during breaks. To the left of the entrance was a corridor leading to the various departments of the hospital. Along the corridor were doctors' offices and patient rooms. There was a special atmosphere here. The walls were painted in calm colors. There were carpets on the floor and benches for resting every few meters. On the doors of the offices hung plaques with the names of doctors and the directions of their work. Even though the hospital looked normal, it was uncomfortable to be here. Lily hated hospitals. She shrugged her shoulders and walked inside, completely ignoring the next admonishment from the guard. The girl tugged her umbrella. Raindrops fell on the shiny floor. Lily pulled on her booties and then headed over to where the nurses stood. "Hello, could you please start talking?" Lily pushed people away. The people began to unequivocally indignant. However, it was clear from Lily's face that she was the kind of person who didn't give a damn about the people around her. She had her own interests at heart and everyone else would wait. "Lily!" Jennifer exclaimed in surprise when she saw her sister. She smiled, jumping up on the spot, waving both arms. Lily backed up, plowing through the people again. It was like she was made of stone. She made all their speeches bounce off of her. Lily slid into the small, cozy office where Jennifer sat. Just then, a nurse came in and dropped off a card. "What are you doing here?" "I have rounds in 15 minutes, Jennifer said, glancing at her watch. Lily sat down on the couch. She didn't hear a thing. The young woman pulled a smile across her face so that her eyes and puffy cheeks were almost invisible. "Tell me, why the hell did you leave Tim?" Lily asked. "I thought you came to town on a business trip." "Experience in you, it turns out you left your fiancé." Jennifer rolled her eyes. She hadn't expected to have to justify her own behavior. She glared at her sister again, but in a way that made her hold her tongue. Naturally, Lily didn't care about any of these threats. "Look, Jennifer, you're an orphan, you don't have a kitten, you don't have a baby, the clock is ticking, you're going to feel bad about not having a baby in time," Lily said, wagging her finger. "Lily, why am I decide when I have my baby? I thought we lived in the 21st century and every woman could deal with her own uterus," Jennifer said insistently, picking up patient charts from the table. "You understand a lot, and I don't want you to turn into an old maid. You swore and swore to me that you loved Tim, didn't you? And now it turns out you dumped him and moved out. What the hell is going on?" "Maybe there's something you're not telling me," Lily asked. "Lily, I have patience," Jennifer said calmly. She stood by the door, holding it open. Lily rolled her eyes and walked out of the office, turning to face her sister. "It'll be too late later," Lily summarized. Lily walked out of the hospital, slamming the glass door defiantly. Jennifer thought she should write another notice to get the door closers fixed, otherwise sooner or later the patients would break the door down. Jennifer took a deep breath and went on her rounds. She examined the patients, talked to them. Sometimes, when there was no desire at all, everything in her head became foggy. Jennifer walked down the cold hallway. There were fewer people, The maximum concentration of people was in the morning, and then the influx again after business hours. Ma walked outside. The shift was coming to an end. How very tired she was. Her head was buzzing, her legs felt like lead. As the summer rain began to rustle across the asphalt, the streets of the city turned into a mysterious place. The lanterns on the poles flickered with soft light, creating a peaceful atmosphere. Raindrops, like small diamonds, sparkled in the light of the lanterns, reflecting their radiance. The streets were deserted. Only occasionally could one see a lone passerby hurrying to take shelter from the rain. The air was fresh and cool, filled with the scent of wet leaves and flowers. The rain was softly pounding on the roofs of the houses, soothing and lulling. On a night like this, it was nice to sit by the window, watching the raindrops dripping down the glass. In the distance, the outlines of trees shrouded in fog could be seen behind the rain. Their branches seemed like huge hands reaching for the sky. The night was silent and still. The sound of the rain broke the silence, but the sound was so harmonious and soothing that it seemed as if the whole world had fallen into slumber. Jennifer descended the steps. She hurried quickly to her small car. If she was stopped and her license checked, she would find that the license plate PL on the car didn't match, but she didn't care much about that. Now she had an excuse for that too. Jennifer drove quickly out of the parking lot, which was completely empty. On the other side, there were still doctors' cars cruising around, but only her crossover was here. When Jennifer found herself at the apartment of the friend she had been living with for the past few weeks, she was in no mood. Her friend was already holding a glass of wine with 2 fingers when she opened the door for her. Pan handed her the glass and went to pour herself another. Em gratefully accepted the treat. She felt so good right now. She plopped down on the long couch. There was an old comedy on the television, but all she could think about was moving. "I'll probably be leaving soon," Jennifer said. "What, a traveling frog? Why can't you stay in one city?" she asked. When Em first entered the living room, she was struck by its beauty and originality. It was decorated in the Bogo style, which combines elements of different cultures and eras. The walls were painted in a warm beige color. On the floor was a bright carpet with ethnic ornaments. The furniture was selected with great taste and variety. In the corner of the room stood a large sofa covered with bright textiles. Next to it were armchairs and picks of different sizes and shapes. On the wall hung bright multicolored wicker plates, creating an atmosphere of coziness and comfort. On the shelves and racks were arranged various items of decoration, vases with flowers, figurines, candlesticks, books, and other accessories. All this created a unique atmosphere of hospitality and coziness. A large fireplace decorated with multicolored ornaments attracted special attention. It did not heat the room but served as an interior decoration. By the fireplace stood a large basket with firewood, and on the wall hung a painting depicting nature. The living room was filled with light thanks to the large windows decorated with light curtains. There were pots of flowers on the window sills, which added freshness and brightness to the interior. Now, every time Jennifer came to her friend's house, this living room was the best place in the apartment. It had a special cozy feel to it, and if given the chance, Jennifer would stay here for good. She was grateful that Pam had taken her in. After all, a friend could refuse shelter for such a long time. "How long have you been here?" "A couple weeks." "Don't you think it's not going to work if you keep darting from place to place?" "You can't run away from yourself, Jennifer," Pam said. Pam walked into the room, and her huge soft slippers made in the shape of snow-white bunnies with ears sticking out caught the eye. She held a glass in one hand and a bottle of wine in the other. The rain was still drumming outside. It made the atmosphere in the apartment even more pleasant. Pam turned off the lights, turned on the warm garlands that glowed without blinking. "I just need to move on indefinitely," Jennifer said. "Look, Jennifer, you and I have been friends since high school. Do you want to tell me what's really going on? What you're doing is weird, to say the least. No person in their right mind would move from town to town without trying to stay. And don't tell me you're choosing a city to live in, that you just need a place to live. Why would you get a job then? I don't understand you." Pam shook her head negatively. Em didn't even try to explain it to her. She knew even then that she couldn't prove anything. They sat and talked, but neither of them really broached the subject of moving again. But Jennifer was an adult. If she decided to leave, she would leave. Besides, Lily's proximity was only causing her problems. The next day, when Jennifer had already arrived at the hospital, she was alarmed. She kept seeing that black car, even after the move. Seeing that darn car had already made her anxious. Taking a deep breath, Jennifer dashed between the glass doors and headed straight for the doctor's office. She'd been working on a contract basis, taking 2 weeks as a trial period. Now that she had received a small payment for her efforts, she was free to leave. The head doctor was obviously upset. He was losing such a specialist. When Olivia arrived at her friend's apartment, she began to pack quickly. Sometimes, Olivia went to the window and looked out, but she didn't see anyone. It had been sunny in the morning, but now, as if on cue, lean clouds were gathering. Jennifer, maybe you'll think about it. It's such a nice city. Look at the climate, what a well-kept city, everything's in place, and the authorities don't forget about us. Wages are good, there's plenty of work. Where to go? To hell on the horns, Pam said angrily. In fact, Pam had her own selfish motives for persuading her friend. She loved living with her, and now, imagining another round of life alone, Pam was starting to feel sad. I'm sorry, Pam. I have to go. And I'll find a place someday, I promise, Jennifer said, hugging her friend. She kissed her hard on the cheek, pulled her close. They stood like that for a few minutes. Jennifer wiped away a tear, walked out of the apartment, holding only her suitcase on her shoulder. Hung a weighty backpack, all of her belongings, absolutely nothing else. Jennifer walked down to the car, loaded her things, looked around, waved to her friend, and then jumped into the car and drove off. Her heart clenched with longing. She wanted to go back to her friend's apartment as soon as possible, to stay where it was nice and warm and peaceful. But the longer she stayed in one place, the worse it got. The road was wet from the rain, and the sun was already setting behind the horizon, coloring the sky in bright orange and pink tones. The young girl behind the wheel of the car was feeling a little tired, but she kept moving forward, oblivious to her own anxiety. The radio hissed and crackled, but the girl didn't try to tune it to another wave. She listened to the weather news, hoping to find out when the rain would end. But the forecasts were disappointing. The rain was expected to continue for several more hours. Despite the bad weather, Jennifer was glad to be on the road. The sun was almost hidden behind the horizon when the girls saw the lights of the city ahead. She smiled and increased her speed, wanting to get to her destination as soon as possible. The small town looked very picturesque during the summer rain. The streets were flooded with water, and raindrops came down on the roofs of houses and trees. The sky was covered with gray clouds, but the air felt fresh and cool. The town was very cozy and quiet. Most of the inhabitants were sitting in their homes, enjoying the warmth and coziness of their dwellings. Only a few passers-by hurried to take shelter from the rain, wrapping themselves in their cloaks and jackets. Long streams flowed down the streets, carrying dirt and debris with them. The summer rain was soothing and peaceful, helping to forget about everyday worries and problems. The houses on the outskirts were shabby old. Jennifer stopped outside one of them. She had arranged to stop by, literally on her way here. How long had she driven? Jennifer couldn't answer that question herself. She caught the social media posts that had come in while she was away. It turned out the drive had taken over 6 hours. It had been so good, so peaceful, that she hadn't paid attention to it at all. Jennifer went into the apartment, handed the money to the owner, and then just drifted off to sleep. She wasn't going to do anything else. Early in the morning, she woke up to a phone call. Olivia picked up the phone and almost immediately recognized her sister's voice. "Where did you disappear to? I came to the hospital to talk to you and there was no sign of you," Lily almost shouted indignantly into the phone. "Maybe, Jennifer, I left because of you," Jennifer said, "and that really was one of the reasons." It was impossible to tolerate her sister, who was only a couple of years older. It was impossible to explain anything to her either. Lily was so impenetrable that simple conversations didn't work on her. She seemed to listen only to scandals. So, no one needs me. At least you had me. And now what? You've run off again, and you won't even tell your own sister where you are, Lily asked. I won't, Jennifer said sternly. You're so smart, so stay wherever you are. You'll die alone hopping from town to town. There was a man. Jennifer hung up. She turned off the sound through the foam on the bed. Once again, her head was on the pillow. If only her sister knew why Jennifer was really always running. But this little town seemed quite peaceful. It was even smaller than the previous one, a godforsaken place, you might say. Perhaps she would stay here for a few months. If the local hospital agreed to take her on for a job like this. The rented apartment on the outskirts of the small town was rather old and shabby. It hadn't been renovated in years. The wallpaper on the walls had peeled off in some places, and in some places was covered in damp stains. The floor was wooden, and there was an old worn carpet on it. On the walls, there were also carpets, which apparently should create coziness, but in fact looked rather dull. Retro motifs in the interior were presented in the form of old photos and frames, which hung on the walls. There were also several pieces of furniture in the apartment that were clearly from the last century, an old closet, a chest of drawers, and a rocking chair. The bathroom was also small and dark, with cracked tiles on the walls and an old tub. The kitchen was rather cramped, with a small stove and an old refrigerator. One couldn't call this dwelling cozy, but for the first time until she found a better place to live, she could settle here. The main thing was not to make contact with anyone at the place of residence. Quick in, quick out. To wave off new acquaintances. Better that everyone remembered her as unsociable than they described her well in case they started looking for the girl at her new workplace. Jennifer quickly acclimated herself. She had changed places so often that she was used to it by now. The doctors accepted her, but not all of them did. There were some who looked at the new girl hotly, apparently not recognizing those who came temporarily. The patients, on the other hand, were very welcoming to the kind, pleasant young woman. Hello, my name is Jennifer, she said as she entered the room. The old man who was lying on the bed coughed. He propped himself up on his elbows. Hello, wow. Where's William? The old man asked. He went on vacation, so I'm here temporarily. Don't worry, I'll make all the appointments with him, Jennifer said with a smile. You look tired, the old man said. Jennifer didn't expect his words so much that she stared at the old man. She looked at herself in the mirror. She looked good, but in fact, she was devastatingly tired of running all the time. You're young, you must be short of money. I know how much the local doctors get paid, tears of a mouse. Let me leave you a number. I have a big apartment, but I'm old. You'll clean up after work, and I'll give you a nice raise, said the old man quickly. He put a number on a piece of paper. Thank you, but... Jennifer started to speak. The old man took her palm, put the paper in it, and then closed the young woman's fingers to squeeze the number. You take it. You'll have time to think about it later. Now, you will plant your health at work, and for what? So you can spend all that money on your own health. Oh, you can see that you're alone, the old man said with a negative shake of his head. You can tell from women that they have no husband or relatives, their eyes are so wistful. A woman should not rely only on herself, but it's just that the age is such that men are rags. He changed the subject to health. He slipped the slip of paper with the number into her pocket and then left the room. How did he know she was an orphan? Surely one of the staff must have blabbed. Old men only pretend to be deaf when it suited them. Jennifer entered the nurse's room. She sat down on the couch, put her leg over her leg, looked over the patient's charts, but the conversation with the old man worried her. She was really desperately short of money. She had to urgently solve the question of housing, or maybe to get out of the place and go further. but all her savings had run out long ago. Jennifer went to the window and looked around at the cars in the parking lot. "Nothing suspicious," Catchet David said, walking into the nurse's station. He yawned and stretched as the man pressed a few buttons on the coffee machine, then plopped down on the couch too. "Don't we have our own residence room?" Jennifer inquired. "We don't now. We all sit in the same room like sparrows in a birdhouse," David said. He was a tall middle-aged man with chiseled cheekbones. He was thin, but it suited him. He had an aristocratic appearance, the kind of man portrayed in portraits of earls. However, the doctor's character was good-natured. Jennifer immediately realized that he was a good person to talk to. "You shouldn't have come to this hospital. There's nothing to do here, even the regular doctors are underpaid. Not even doctors like you. You're a good girl, patients follow you around. But the staff are unpleasant," David said. Jennifer got up from the couch to make coffee for both of them. The man looked at her gratefully. After the night shift, it was hard for him to get up. Every time she served him his coffee, setting the cookies on the table, David looked focused. "How long will you be here?" David asked. "Honestly, I don't know. I'm bouncing from town to town, you know, like my sister says, you can't run away from yourself. But I think it's worth a try. I want to find a place that feels right for me. My home isn't a place, it's people. I realized that late, but I'm grateful that life has taught me that. I realized it when I met my second wife. Now, I'd go anywhere in the world with her as long as we're together. And a house is just a box. No, it's not. It's nice to have a roof over your head, but you can have a rented place too, as long as you have a soulmate nearby," the man said. Jennifer nodded. She didn't know what to say to something like that. After all, there were too many thoughts that had nothing to do with this situation and not a single living soul who she could tell the truth to. "Oh, the cuckoo," and said, running into the nurse's room. She poured herself some coffee too and then a few shots of cream, and sat down in a chair with her feet up on the arm. She tipped her head back and exhaled with pleasure. "This is a nightmare. The broads come in, they don't know what they want. Hey, new girl, do you even know that they want to transfer you to another department?" And suddenly switched over, glancing at Jennifer, seeing her surprised eyes, and waved her off. "Welcome to our idiotic management. They'll come up with other things for you, okay? Hang in there, baby, and then you'll find out they don't want to pay you. That's the kind of we are, that's why there's a lot of turnover. I'm sorry to leave. Who are the patients going to come to, the doctor?" It was a long conversation, the topics jumped from one to another. When Olivia finally finished another day of work, she walked home. There was no point in jerking the car around for 15 minutes. Besides, the street she had to walk down was often jammed with traffic. No wonder her car was now parked in the parking lot of the apartment. Jennifer never moved out, couldn't find a better place to live for the money. She'd been in this godforsaken town for weeks, time dragged on. No suspicious faces. Jennifer tried to come up with a plan already, she didn't know where to run to. Moving further towards the northern regions, the car was not adapted to constant driving in the snow, and she herself was not very fond of the cold. Going back south was too dangerous, to end up where she had almost been caught by the throat. She found herself outside a multi-story old, shabby house. She quickly climbed the steps of the entryway, entered the apartment, and felt an imaginary sense of security. No, if they wanted to, they'd get her, even in this apartment. But she hoped that this time she had gotten away in time. This was the first summer she'd spent running away. When she'd started all those trips 6 months ago, the memories had dulled considerably. The summer evening was quiet and peaceful. The sun was already sinking below the horizon, and the girl was enjoying the last warm rays on the balcony. She looked at the city, which was gradually enveloped by darkness, and thought about the fact that soon autumn would come and everything around would bloom with new colors. The girl took a cup of hot coffee and took a sip, enjoying its taste and aroma. She felt the warmth of the drink spreading through her body, warming her after the chilly evening. The night city was beautiful. The lights of lanterns and windows of houses created a cozy atmosphere, and the sounds of the city came to the balcony, creating pleasant music. The girl closed her eyes and imagined how she would sit on this same balcony, looking at the blossoming trees and listening to the birds singing. But it wasn't meant to be. She couldn't stay here until spring, and she wanted to find someplace where she could live at least a few more months. But it was all just a dream. She smiled and took another sip of coffee, feeling her heart fill with joy and hope for the future. Jennifer only picked up the phone because she didn't want to arouse suspicion. And if she heard an unfamiliar voice, she would lower the timbre and say that the person was mistaken. If it was someone familiar, Jennifer would be happy to hear a painfully soulful voice. Her sister's voice, however, sounded more worried than familiar. "Just don't hang up, Jennifer. Tell me, have you gotten yourself into something?" Els asked. The question made her gut crumble. Jennifer tensed like a string. She went straight into the apartment, closing the balcony so no one would overhear her words. She felt the alarm bell ringing in her head. Jennifer took a deep breath to make her voice seem calm and measured. "Why do you always come to such pessimistic conclusions?" Jennifer inquired, but she screwed up. Anxiety was audible in her voice. "You bet." The atmosphere was heating up. Less and less time passed between episodes when she was found. Maybe she had no chance of getting away at all. "Let's not make a spectacle of ourselves, okay?" In a disgruntled voice, Lily asked. Jennifer took another deep breath, but this time to keep from snapping at her sister. Why did she pretend to know everything better than anyone else in the world? Every time, it was annoying. "I came to your work to ask your boss where you were. I thought she'd tell me, but instead, I ran into someone who was looking for you too," Lily said. When Jennifer heard this, her breathing became much more frequent. She flinched and was glad that Lily couldn't see her face. Jennifer stood directly in front of the mirror. Her skin went pale as if on cue. "Can you hear me?" Lily asked. "Is that all?" Jennifer asked. "No," said Lily calmly. Lily couldn't see her sister's face, but she could literally feel her sister's frenzy of ignorance. The situation that had been building up so dramatically had subsided. Over the next week, Jennifer didn't look around as much anymore. There was no one suspicious around. Everything was quiet and peaceful. The warm fall day was the perfect time for a walk in the park. Jennifer only entered the park to get a coffee. The small stall here made a simply amazing drink. The sun was shining brightly, but it wasn't hot, and a light breeze was pleasantly mulling over her face. The leaves on the trees were already starting to change their color, and the park was full of colors from bright yellow to deep red. Jennifer walked along the path, enjoying the beauty of the autumn park. Dry leaves rustled under her feet, and the air was filled with the scent of fresh leaves. It was quiet all around, only sometimes you could hear the rustling of leaves and the singing of birds. What was missing for complete happiness was a caramel apple. She closed her eyes and imagined that one day she would have her own house. It would always smell of cinnamon, apples, fresh pies, and she would finally be free from this endless fear and running away. But for now, it was all just a dream. The falling leaves created a beautiful carpet on the ground, and the girl couldn't resist picking a few beautiful leaves for her bouquet. She walked through the park, admiring the fall colors and enjoying the peace and quiet. Jennifer lingered here too long. She liked this peaceful, quiet town, but she needed to move on. And if she didn't move when she was already found, it wouldn't end well. If you want to run, be one step ahead. Jennifer pondered what to do next. She had been fired 2 days ago. She had made a scandal since they had no right to fire her. Moreover, no one had paid her for the fully worked month. Everything was strange. Jennifer was completely confused and frustrated. No amount of scandals helped. All those employees who were supposedly on her side had tucked their tails and given up. She was left alone with her boss, who sputtered and proved that she didn't have to pay. Jennifer lost a month's money. It was getting scarce. The girl took out the old man's phone number, which she still kept in her bag. She dialed the number. The good-natured grandfather immediately agreed and set a time and day for her. Olivia felt ashamed that she would charge the old man for cleaning, but she needed the money to move on. My Jennifer, wait, she heard. The girl turned her head. Her coarse brown curls bounced elastically on her hair with warm chocolate highlights. She looked up at the thin man who had called out to her. At first, she wanted to snap out of her seat and run, but in a second, she realized it was David. "What is it this time?" Jennifer asked with a strained smile. On the one hand, she realized that no one had to stick up for her. She was new, she came, she went, why stick up for her? But on the other hand, it was a shame that all these people tolerated the beastly treatment and didn't try to change anything. David folded his arms so that she placed her palm on his forearm. Now the two of them were walking together down a long fall alley with the leaves rustling beneath their feet. "Are you not offended, me look?" David started to say. "What's there to talk about? I already know perfectly well that you're all holding on to this place. Really, I don't understand why the hell grown-up people put up with being ridden by yourselves and complaining that your paychecks are late and yet calmly swallowing what happened," Jennifer said. It felt good to shift her thoughts to another topic. All Jennifer had been thinking about lately was moving, and that made the anxiety inside grow. Olivia felt completely frustrated, broken. Her soul was in turmoil. She only fired you to keep you out of her hair. She had a niece graduating from university. She wanted her to take your place. There's a girl there who's an idiot. She's already causing so much trouble, David said. However, he didn't answer any of the questions Jennifer voiced. She didn't try to elicit anything more from him. It was just nice to walk with him like an old friend, and no other way did she regard him. She had Tim in her heart forever. Yes, she had to leave him to get away, but someday she hoped to come back. "I actually have a proposition for you," our head doctor spoke to me. "She knows you and I are in touch. She suggested that I ask you back. You want to come back to work here. You like the staff, don't you? Believe me, if you come back, the boss will be chasing you," he said. There was hope in David's eyes. He smiled, looking into Jennifer's eyes. But he realized almost immediately that she would say no. "I've got to get a move on, so I have to decline," Jennifer said. "I really enjoyed the city and your company. I liked working for you even in spite of that fool, but I have to move on." "Another one of your mythical escapes from yourself," with a chuckle David said. "Yes, an escape from myself. You know, when I'm old I won't have time for this. In a couple of years, I'll be all over the country. Maybe I'll find a place of peace," she said. He walked her home. They talked for a while and said goodbye, and Jennifer shook his hand firmly. She knew she'd never see him again. Do a couple of cleaning jobs, take some stupid remote work, and then just run away like she always did. The next day, Jennifer had to go to the address. When she found herself outside the apartment building, it wasn't like the others. Judging by the windows, the ceilings in the apartments were high, and the building itself was old and stately. Jennifer went to the intercom, which looked ridiculous on the beautiful carved doors. She stepped inside. The steps were unaccustomed high too. Jennifer quickly reached the right apartment, knocked. It felt as if she had traveled back a few centuries, and her modern clothes looked completely out of place. "Jennifer, how nice, how timely," the old man said with a smile. "You come in, don't be shy." When Olivia stepped inside, her jaw dropped. She had never seen an apartment like this before. The bohemian old apartment was a marvelous combination of luxury and simplicity. The high ceilings were adorned with elite cornices, and the walls were covered with delicately patterned silk wallpaper. There were antique mirrors in carved frames, reflecting light everywhere. The huge living room was furnished with dark wood furniture decorated with gold and silver. On the floor was a soft rug with oriental ornaments, and on the walls hung paintings in heavy frames. In the center of the room stood a huge piano covered with black lacquer. The bedroom was cozier, and the simple bed was covered with a silk bedspread, and heavy curtains hung from the windows. On the dressing table were antique bottles of perfume and powder, and next to it, a jewelry box. The kitchen was small but very cozy. There was an antique cupboard filled with dishes, and a large table where the whole family gathered. On the walls hung copper pots and frying pans, and on the shelves stood jars of spices and herbs. The whole apartment was filled with the fragrance of flowers that stood in vases on each one on the table. "It's like I was in the last century," Jennifer muttered admiringly, but she didn't have time to say anything else. There came a sharp voice. Then came a sharp pain in the back of her head. Olivia collapsed like a puppet with its strings cut. She immediately realized she was trapped. The next time Olivia opened her eyes, her hands and feet were bound. She didn't know how long she had spent in this dark place. At first, it seemed like her eyes were blindfolded too, but it was just that it was dark in here. The rumble of the car made it immediately clear that she was in the trunk. The space was disastrously small. Nazar was coming up to her throat. Vika did her best to hold it back, otherwise she would suffocate. After all, her mouth was tied shut. It smelled like machine oil in here. The smell of dirty rags inexorably penetrated her nostrils. "Got a bird. It took her so long to get here. Girl, try to catch it," a voice came from the cabin. Jennifer froze. What would they talk about? That they would hit her on the head with a shovel and then throw her into a hole somewhere in the woods? The car rocked violently. Olivia jumped up and banged her shoulder painfully against the trunk lid. Who knew she'd get this far? If she'd left a week earlier, I wouldn't have tracked her down at all. She doesn't tell anybody anything. She just shows up, leaves, and that's it. Try to find a needle in a haystack, the man said indignantly. Jennifer knew she had done everything she could to keep from being found, but apparently it wasn't enough. Sooner or later, someone would come upon her anyway. It was impossible not to make a mistake with dozens of people looking for you. At least the boss will be happy. He's going to have us out of his hair in no time. And if we miss her, or anyone else next time, by God, he'll be shaking in the trunk, said the young guy and laughed. Well, I don't know. I don't think she'll confess where it's all going. If I were her, I would have sold it long ago and given the money to a trusted person. At the very least, I'd just buy new papers and go abroad. How do you find her if her name's different? You can't. It's only in books that the mafia is all-powerful, and we are all tied to the number, the voice said. I'm not happy. Jennifer already wanted to take new documents, but first, she needed to be free from prosecution for at least a couple of months so she wouldn't have to go back to the meeting place. Or she'd order the documents and be trapped. Who would have thought that being trapped would make her so stupid and obvious that even a child would realize? Olivia felt her tears flowing with resentment. So many months, and it had all been for nothing. The car shook violently again, then one last time when she was jerked sideways. She felt a pain in her back. The pain pierced through. By the time they got there, the road was bumpy. Each pothole reverberated painfully in Olivia's body. She thought she was going to be taken to a restaurant. It was good to have at least the last few hours alone with her thoughts. But finally, the car stopped, branches crunching, a sound that was clearly not from the city. A wild bird screamed, and the first thought that popped into Jennifer's head was that they were in the woods. This is it. Now she would be thrown into the pit, interrogated beforehand, and if everything was figured out before they grabbed her, there would be no interrogation. Here we go, there was a man's voice. When the trunk was unzipped, Jennifer squeezed her eyes shut. She was afraid the sunlight would hit her eyes and she wouldn't be able to see her captor. Except it was night outside. To say she was stunned was an understatement. It turns out it had been over 10 hours since she'd been knocked out. They hadn't just hit her, they'd injected her with something. One question after another popped into her head. Only there was no one to answer them. A big man with one hand grabbed her by the ropes that wrapped around her body. He unloaded her from the trunk like an old suitcase. You could tell by the man's face that she wasn't even heavy. A sheep's weight, for God's sake. All the girls are skinny. Where are we going? Said the man. Jennifer hoped those words were spoken into the void. She was thrown on a pile of dry leaves. The fear slowly dissolved. What remained was a kind of shocked stillness inside. The man knelt down, untied her legs, and then took her by the chin. "You twitch sideways, and I'll tie you up and leave you here," he said. Jennifer nodded. It would be foolish to run when she was surrounded by 3 men. But that didn't stop her from swiveling her head in all directions. They were indeed in the woods. Yellowed leaves adjacent to the evergreen ones looked bizarrely illuminated by the moonlight. It felt as if only a select few trees had been gifted with golden coats. The old hunting lodge, which stood deep in the forest, was built of thick logs and roofed with thatch. Its walls were decorated with the heads of animals killed in the hunt, and the floor was covered with skins. In the center of the cabin was a large stone hearth in which a fire burned, warming the room. Jennifer noticed another man sitting at the table, a tall, thin, hunched man. He was looking at some papers, or maybe it was a map. The light from the fireplace was faint. There was no electricity here. From the stuffiness of the smell of animal skins, the hunger, the disgusting ride, she began to feel nauseous. Against one wall was a large wooden bed covered with a bearskin. Next to it was a closet with weapons and hunting trophies. On the table by the window were maps and books. Outside the window was a dense forest that surrounded the cabin on all sides. The sky peeked through the trees. In the distance could be heard the howls of wolves and the cries of birds, and in the air, there was the smell of pine needles and smoke from the fire. The hunters who came to the cabin must have spent long winter evenings here, telling each other stories of their adventures and dreams, and of future campaigns. They listened to the wind howling outside the window, the crackling of wood in the fireplace, and the rustling of leaves on the trees, and it created the atmosphere of coziness and peace that hunters valued so much. But now, this place would be her execution. Jennifer was left in a room with a huge bed. A bucket was placed by her. A packet of chips was thrown in, a bottle of water. Jennifer had no idea how long she was going to be here. A scolding could be heard outside the door. Jennifer tried to listen, but nothing came out. "The boss is going to kill you." "Are you crazy?" a young voice shouted. Just then, the door opened. A thin man walked in. He turned his head and then shouted to the young one, "And you talk less. Then he won't know you'd think his hands weren't bloody. She's still a living person." He put a small tray on the table. Mashed potatoes, a couple of cutlets, hot tea in a tall, iron-rimmed cup, and sliced bread next to it. He smiled slightly. "Eat in peace. You've got 6, maybe 8 hours to sit here, eat. Put the tray by the door and sleep. You have a hard day ahead of you," the man said. Honestly, she thanked him warmly. Olivia was really hungry. There was no strength at all. The scolding outside the door had stopped. Still, she lay on the bed, palm stroking her pelt. She had no idea what kind of beast it was. Judging by the coloring, it looked more like a bear. What if it was some kind of brown wolf? Who knew what they were hunting? There was no sleep. Jennifer got out of bed and walked to the window. She saw no way out. Even if she broke the glass and ran out of here, nothing would help. What good would it do? If they don't kill her here, they'll be eaten by wild animals. God forbid she gets caught in a trap. Suddenly, there was a ruckus outside the door. "Why do we have to keep her here? I told you I'm not going to let you put a slaughterous in here. Didn't you bring the cabin for hunting?" No, a thin man's voice asked. Almost immediately, Jennifer realized he wasn't in on it. Rather, it was clearly a ranger or hunter who lived in the house. Jennifer tipped closer to the door. She leaned back in her chair and tried to listen. "We're indentured servants, like you said," a low, heavy baritone said. "We were told to bring her in. It's a pity about the girl. She's young. Maybe he'll think of something if she gives him what he wants. Maybe he'll let her go. He's not the kind of guy who just wants to bury her, right?" a young voice asked. "That's right. But the girl's been running too long. I don't know what's going to happen next." There was a crackle and a fire broke out. Someone had put wood in the fireplace. Bright flashes of warm flames flickered under the door. The fireplace heated the room well. Even in this room with the door closed, it was relatively warm. Olivia wished she could be there by the fireplace itself. In the meantime, she had to wrap herself in animal skin. If she had one chance to escape, she would surely take it. Jennifer fell asleep in the chair. She awoke to someone gently touching her shoulder with the palm of his hand. It was the same thin, tall man. In the good daylight, Jennifer could see that the man was old, with silver hair, white eyebrows, and stubble. The eyes, which must have been bright blue in his youth, had faded to almost colorless. "Come on, granddaughter. It's time, and I can't help you." "Don't be angry with me," he said. Jennifer rose from her seat, her head aching. She always felt bad in the morning. She had to take a shower, drink coffee, and only then could she make any decisions. She did get coffee. They also gave her a sandwich with a thick ring of sausage. Jennifer sat quietly, chewing. No one was in the room. The table was huge. It was as if it had been carved from centuries-old oak. Olivia looked out the window. There were 4 men standing there. The thin, old man, who must have been the owner of the hunting lodge, was a head taller than the others. He smoked, nodded, said little, listened more. The young boy was hardly older than Jennifer. He was smiling. Surely, for him, this job was full of romance. The one who spoke in a low baritone was a stout man, more like a bear. He had big shoulders and arms, even his face seemed to be bulging with muscles. He was also saying something. Another man stood a few feet away from them, talking on the phone. Jennifer knew there was no escape. Even if she jumped out of the house right now, it was good to be fed, at least. But here came a car. Jennifer flinched when she saw it because she knew who was there. She looked at the man who got out of the car. This was the end of her. A fat man with sagging cheeks got out of the car with great difficulty. He had turned red, his face turned crimson immediately. The man grabbed the door because he was suffering from shortness of breath. He threw his head back, then leaned forward again. The driver got out of the car and immediately began to help him. Jennifer didn't have time to finish the show. The bear walked in. He looked her over from head to toe, asked her to sit on another chair, and then tied her up. Jennifer could see that all these people were reluctant to treat her badly. Maybe it was simply because she had obeyed every order without question, or maybe because they were hoping for some kind of reward in the end. Jennifer tried not to think about it now. She sat tied up in a narrow, uncomfortable chair. The fireplace had long since gone out. The black logs were spinning on top of each other. She wanted to stir the embers, toss in some wood, light it, and listen to the fire. When the fat man came in, he was still breathless. He collapsed into a huge hunting chair over which hung the head of the deer with antlers. No one else was here. The man opened the can of soda and drank it down. He wiped his mouth with the back of his hand and tossed the can aside. He had a disgusted smile on his face. "You got yourself a bird. I'll throw you to those hungry creatures too. They'll have a lot of fun with you on this bed. If you don't die here with them, you're out of here. And that's only if you tell me where you're going. And if you keep silent, I'll shoot you in the head at dawn." "But only through the bed," said the man and laughed. While he was laughing, his head was tilted back, his fat neck was shaking, and drool flew in all directions. His teeth, set in gold, looked wretched. The thick gold cross hung around his neck. The man looked at her again, resting his head on her shoulder. "Why me? What makes you think it's me?" Jennifer said in an innocent voice. "You dropped the matter. It won't do you any good. You think you're smarter than everyone else, no girl. Trust me, you're the kind of girl I'd crack like peanuts. You're a pretty girl. If I was younger, I'd do you myself." He laughed again. Contempt mixed with fear as Jennifer thought of the horror that awaited her in that cabin. Thoughts of escape became vivid. Better to let her be killed by a bear and gnawed by wolves or have her drowned in an icy forest river. Anything was better than letting those things have their fun with her. Okay, let me put it another way. If I could, I'd let you go. But I can't. Give me the necklace back, and you and I can talk about what happens next. It's important that I get that thing back. It's an heirloom to me, a family heirloom. If you think I'm some kind of freak who's just going to get nailed and thrown in the river, you're wrong. They're finding people like me pretty fast these days. We have to be careful. And you're young, even though you're an orphan. But too many people know you. He stopped talking. Jennifer tried not to feel hope in her chest. No hope could help her now. He could pour sweet, honeyed speeches into her ears, and then just slit her throat right there on the bed. Olivia just stared into the little piggy eyes on his greasy face. And I give you exactly 24 hours. If after 24 hours you return it to me or tell me where to get my necklace, I'll personally drive you to the nearest bus station myself. But only 24 hours. Look at the clock, he said, pointing with a fat finger that looked more like a wiener. 10 o'clock in the morning tomorrow. I'll arrive at exactly the same time. And if you decide to keep quiet, you're on your own. He stood up, resting his hand on the log wall. When the man left the room, only the smell of sweat remained. Jennifer found herself unbound, but once again locked in a room with a bed. And now, as she looked at that bed and thought of what would be done to her, she was at once filled with terror. She began to shake, tears coming in waves. Jennifer felt she could no longer contain her fear. When the door swung open and a young man came in, pouncing on her, Olivia had no strength to fight back. She could only push him away. The guy jerked back sharply, his back hit the cabinet from which the book had fallen. "What are you fidgeting for?" "The warden authorized it," the young man said with a smirk. "Get out of here," the old man bellowed, pointing his gun at the young man. The old man seemed to appear out of nowhere. Didn't even hear him enter the house. The young boy immediately tucked his tail and ran out of the room. The old man looked at the girl, nodded, and then closed the door, clicking the lock. It was impossible to sleep. Jennifer was now terribly afraid that any of these freaks might break into this room over the next few hours. Olivia had searched every corner of this room. She hoped to find something to hit out. The autumn forest was unusually beautiful this time of year. The trees were covered in gold and green, and colorful leaves rustled beneath her feet. The girl watched this beauty from the window of the hunting lodge. She would give anything in the world to get out of here, not the necklace. Right now, she had to figure out how to get herself out of this nightmare. Everything she'd imagined and replayed before her eyes was now a reality. It was evening, and the sun was already beginning to set over the horizon. The sky was turning pink and orange, and the forest was getting darker and darker. There was a cool breeze in the air that brought with it the smell of leaves and smoke from the campfires. The girl enjoyed the silence and tranquility that reigned in the forest. She could hear the birds singing in the distance and the wind rustling the leaves of the trees. It was the perfect place to relax and reflect on life. The hunting lodge was warm and cozy. There was a fire burning in the fireplace and candles on the table, which created an atmosphere of peace and tranquility. But she didn't feel any peace at all. Her teeth were chattering with fear. However, there was no strength against her own whim. She dozed off. She woke up to a commotion in the room. There was a shriek, a bang, another bang, then a gunshot, and then another. Jennifer tensed like a string. She grabbed the wrought iron candlestick that stood on the dresser and prepared to fight back. Someone had knocked the lock off the door, and when the door swung open, Jennifer swung the candlestick. But when she saw the face lit by the fireplace stains, she was stunned. It was her late father. "Quick," he bellowed. Jennifer literally jumped over the men lying on the floor and flew outside. Never before had the fall air felt so sweet to her. She heard a wolf howl in the distance, saying goodbye to the beautiful moon. "I said quickly," he shouted, pointing at the car. The time-beaten SUV was covered in mud. Small raindrops were falling every now and then. "They'll wake up, and we'll have to fly." I didn't have to say it again. Jennifer jumped into the car, and the man got behind the wheel. He turned the car sharply, pushed the gas pedal to the floor. The car stalled for a few seconds, throwing dirt clouds to the sides, and then drove forward. Jennifer looked back involuntarily. The hunting lodge looked abandoned, unloved, and only the silhouette of an old hunter flaunted nearby. He threw his rifle on his shoulder and escorted the girl with a glance. The car moved slowly along the winding road, surrounded by dense forest. The autumn night had already fallen, and the cool breath of the approaching dawn could be felt in the air. The sky was covered with dark clouds that heralded the imminent rain. The forest on both sides of the road was painted in bright autumn colors, golden yellow, red, and orange. The branches of the trees swayed in the wind, wounding the last leaves to the ground. In the darkness of the forest flickered the lights of fireflies, twinkling like small stars. Suddenly, it began to rain. Large drops pounded on the roof of the car. The wipers moved, clearing the water from the glass, and the road became more clearly visible in the light of the headlights. You could see the raindrops dancing on the asphalt, turning into small streams. The driver kept his eyes on the road, trying not to miss a turn. He had been driving for hours, and he wanted to get to his destination sooner. But the rain was getting heavier, so he decided to stop at the nearest gas station to wait out the weather. The car stopped at the gas station, and the driver got out, wrapped in his raincoat. He went into a store and bought coffee to keep warm. He returned to the car with not only 2 cups of coffee, but also paper bags of food. Jennifer took one of the bags and immediately took out a hot dog and took a bite of it. She was insanely hungry. Fatty food and coffee were the only things she needed right now to come to her senses. With distraught eyes, Jennifer looked at her father. She had buried him herself, had been at the funeral. Had it all been a dream? Harry didn't answer her questions. As soon as they had eaten a bite to eat, the car started up again. When Jennifer woke up, the car had stopped. Jennifer looked to the right. The old roadside motel was one of those places you only find in the outback. It had been built at the beginning of the last century and hadn't changed much since then. The motel was a 2-story building made in the Art Nouveau style. Its facade was decorated with numerous columns and arches, and the roof was covered with red tiles. Inside, there were many rooms, each of which was furnished in a different style. Some rooms had wooden floors and walls decorated with paintings depicting local scenery. In other rooms, leather sofas and armchairs could be seen, as well as large fireplaces with fires burning in them. Jennifer had seen motels like this while she was running, staying in all sorts of rooms. Once again, as if by magic, she found herself in a place like this. The second floor of the motel was devoted to guest rooms. Each room had its own bathroom and a balcony with a view of the surrounding area. The rooms had large beds, closets, and televisions. Jennifer entered the room, collapsing on the bed. The man left to take a shower. When he returned in a white robe, Jennifer followed suit. She felt heavy and sick with the realization that it wasn't over yet. Her father had left her several boxes in the bathroom, new lenses, hair dye. Jennifer understood exactly where things were going, without asking too many questions. She recolored her hair, put the lenses in. She went from a blonde, blue-eyed girl to a brownie brunette. Jennifer cut her hair to her shoulders. She even liked her new look. "How is that possible?" Jennifer asked. She waited for some answer from her father, but he was in no hurry to answer. "Here are your new documents. They are all official. There is nothing to be afraid of. You can even get a passport if you want. Here's a full set of SNS and N. There's even a labor book with places of work. I'll sort it out and send you a letter when it's done," Harry said. "Daddy!" Jennifer screamed. He put his finger to his lips. Of course, he realized she was expecting answers from him, but he doubted that even in a few 24 hours he would be able to tell her properly what had happened in that time. "Yes, I'm alive, and believe me, that's the only thing you should know. I've been living abroad all this time, and I'll be back there as soon as I can help you. If I had known my daughter would follow in my footsteps, I'm sure I would have thought of workarounds in advance," said Harry with an awkward smile. And Mom? Jennifer asked quietly, with undisguised hope. I'm sorry, but my mom is really dead, and I miss her every day. My sole hold is my heart. We'll see each other again someday, I know, he's doing well. How could you get yourself into this? What makes you think you can stand up to someone like that? Okay, you don't have to answer that, Harry waved Jennifer off as soon as she opened her mouth. I guess it's in our blood. Give me that. Here, Jennifer slipped her hand into her bra, spreading the bottom of her bra right over the bones. She kept the very same necklace there. It hurt her every time, but it was the one place she could cherish 24 hours a day. When she finally pulled it out, its sweet feeling of comfort, the necklace, was amazing, real gold, tiny scattered stones embossed. No one makes jewelry like that now. I'll send you the money on the cards, we can't risk you selling it yourself. I need some time to sort things out now. I'll take you to the train station, and we'll never see each other again, Jennifer finished Jennifer's sentence for him. She looked at her own father and couldn't believe he was alive. He had come into her life to save her and then disappeared again, but now forever. You're perfectly safe, Jennifer, and I've been thinking about this plan for months and had to change everything in a matter of days, but I'll still give you an address where you should wait a few months, only then can you relax, and I hope you'll understand me correctly. Here's the address, here are the tickets. You just need to get on the bus and act normal. I bought some things, but I didn't expect you to get so thin. He looked at her with regret, and after all this running around, she'd lost 20-odd pounds in 6 months. Jennifer hadn't expected to lose that much weight herself, but now that she had a chance at freedom, it didn't matter anymore. Jennifer hugged her father and cried. 3 hours later, he brought her to the bus station. She hugged him goodbye, picked up a small gym bag, rested her head against her father's shoulder once more. Jennifer felt in her heart that this was their last meeting before she could turn around. Her father was gone. It was like a guardian angel had appeared to save her and then vanished as if he never existed. Jennifer looked at the new paperwork. It was a good thing the name was the same. The old bus station was a place that reminded her of the past. It had been built back in the days when buses were the main mode of transportation. The bus station was small and quite cozy inside. There were a few ticket booths where tickets were sold and a small cafe where passengers could have a snack before departing. Jennifer sat down at a table and got a small sandwich and a coffee. She had her ticket in hand. She had no idea where she was going, but if her father said it was safe there, then she could exhale. The hustle and bustle at the bus station were commonplace. Passengers were constantly coming and going, and buses were arriving and departing in what seemed like an endless cycle. Sometimes it was hard to find an empty seat, but that just added to the atmosphere of the place. The bus driver was always ready to help passengers, and the conductor made sure everyone was in their seats. Finally, the bus number sounded. Olivia stood up, threw away her plastic cup, and walked towards her bus. She got in line. There were all sorts of people, from old men to young girls with small children. Some woman was reprimanding a boy who must have done something. An uncle who was smoking near a lamppost seemed to be counting the people in line by head. Jennifer felt at peace being in a crowd for the first time in a long time. She trusted her father, and if he said he would solve the problem soon, her turn came up. Jennifer held out her ticket and showed her ID. The driver looked at the photo, then at the girl herself, nodded. Maya entered the bus and took her seat right by the window. She watched other people go inside. Everyone had suitcases and belongings, but all she had was this bag and the cell phone her father had handed her. How did he even know? If it wasn't for that old hunter man, Jennifer might not even be alive anymore. All these thoughts rolled over her in a wave, bringing with them fear and anxiety. You can sleep now. I have all your exit points written down. Don't worry, we won't slip past, said a full-bodied woman who held a list on a special holder. She sat down next to the driver, and the ride began. The bus finally filled up, a radio with Soviet songs played. Turning around, the bus left first from the bus station and then left the city. For the first time, there was a buzz in the bus. Everyone was trying to get comfortable. The old bus moved slowly along the road shrouded in fall foliage. The sun had long ago crossed zenith and was now slowly sinking towards the horizon. The bus was crowded, and every passenger was busy with their own thoughts. Among the passengers, one could notice an elderly man with gray hair and a wrinkled face. He sat by the window and looked thoughtfully at the trees running past. Next to him sat a young girl with long blonde hair and bright blue eyes. She was dressed in a light dress decorated with flowers and looked very cute and attractive. A leather jacket with a fur collar was thrown over her shoulders. Another passenger was a young man wearing jeans and a t-shirt. He was sitting at the end of the bus and reading a book, occasionally looking out the window at the scenery passing by. In the front seat was a middle-aged woman with bright red hair and green eyes. She was looking at the road and thinking about something of her own. She looked like a young urban witch. Jennifer even smiled involuntarily, for she too was not herself now. How long would she have to keep up this masquerade? The bus slowly moved forward, and clouds were already gathering on the horizon, but the passengers paid no attention to it and continued on their way, each with their own thoughts and worries. The bus had to stop 6 times before finally arriving in another city. Olivia had to get off halfway through the journey. She dozed off, clutching her gym bag tightly. Things were bound to get better, it would. Jennifer woke up when her stop was announced. The bus would stop in 10 minutes. The girl yawned. She saw the conductor walking toward her and waved her hand, saying she was awake. She smiled and returned to her seat. Evening was gradually descending outside. She must have been on the road for no more than 3 hours. Jennifer yawned again, unable to overcome her slumber. The large, modern village was located on the bank of a wide river, surrounded by fields. The village was built in a modern style, with wide streets and beautiful houses. The residents looked welcoming and friendly. They were engaged in various activities such as farming, handicrafts, and trade. It felt as if progress had visited the place, but many chose to stay in their century. Surely, the village must have been rich in culture and tradition. Various festivals and celebrations were held here. There was also a school in the village. Even from here were visible a few stores, house of culture, a small shopping center where most likely nestled a cinema. A full-fledged urban-type village that looked even better than the town where Olivia had last been. The girl stepped off the bus, waving goodbye to those leaving to go away. She stood completely alone near the bridge. 2 young men stood with their elbows resting on the bridge railing. They were holding fishing rods. The guys were laughing. They were reminiscing every now and then, waving their arms, forgetting their instruments. "Guys, where's Center Street?" she asked. "Oh, there's the new girl. You're moving to Center? There's only one house for sale there, a nice one. You go straight ahead, then turn right from the store, to the left, and it's about 10 m there. You won't get lost," the blond boy said with a smile. Jennifer nodded, thanking him for his help. She finally reached her house. Olivia had expected to see an abandoned, ramshackle house that looked more like a barn, but when she dialed the right place, she couldn't believe it. At first, number 14, it was right. A small, modern country house stood close to the fence enclosing the garden and yard. The cottage was built of snow-white brick. It looked neat, open-worked. The front yard was paved with tiles and decorated with flowers and ornamental trees. In the center of the courtyard was a small fountain, which created a pleasant atmosphere of coolness on hot days. Although this construction could hardly be called a full-fledged fountain, it was more like a drinker for the village birds, which were not afraid of anyone. The garden was well-kept and beautiful. There were apple, pear, cherry, and plum trees, as well as many other trees and shrubs. There was a small greenhouse in the garden. There were many flowers, such as roses, lilies, peonies, and hydrangeas. The plot was tiny, no more than 8 acres. However, someone had done a very clever job of fitting everything in. The small modern village house was a cozy and comfortable place to live. When Jennifer went inside, everything was almost new, inexpensive, but quite new. Apparently, someone had made the house for himself and then, for some reason, decided to sell it. Its bright, cozy interior, warm colors, Jennifer cried involuntarily. Would she really have a house? She fell to her knees and burst into full-blown tears. She didn't care if anyone ate her heart clenched with pain and the fear she had experienced. She had been through so much. She'd regretted taking that denim necklace a million times over these days. A million times she'd regretted doing it for money. No money is worth freedom. Em didn't calm down until a couple of hours later. She hadn't expected to be so emotional herself. The card her father had given her could be cashed in easily. There was a bank here, several ATMs open 24 hours a day. Stores accepted the cards with ease. There was enough money for Jennifer to live on for a year if she didn't spend too much. Gradually, Jennifer began to settle into her new place. She welcomed the first month of winter, rejoiced in the flakes of snow, went to the store, socialized with the locals. Her neighbor, who seemed to be a rough and tough woman, turned out to be quite nice. She taught Olivia the wisdom of caring for the flowers and trees. The more Jennifer lived here, the more she fell in love with the place. She missed her sister, her friend, her failed husband, but nothing could ever go back. One day, Jennifer decided it was time to see the house in its entirety. From the outside, it looked like the house had an attic, but inside, it wasn't so easy. Jennifer banged her beak and barely managed to catch the ladder that had fallen down. But when she got to the top, she was stunned. Along the walls were large boxes filled with all sorts of things. There were old books, photographs, toys, and even a Christmas tree decorated with old glass balls and tinsel. All of it was covered with dust and cobwebs, but the girl, having discovered this treasure trove, was delighted with the find. She began to open the boxes and examine their contents. The books were mostly old and tattered, toys old and forgotten. But the girl decided that they could be great decorations for her new home. And the Christmas tree was a real treasure. It was decorated with old toys, which the girl decided to save for future holidays. Strangely, the toys were old glass ones, and the Christmas tree itself, though artificial, was quite modern. Jennifer removed all the toys from it, dragged it downstairs, and washed it in the shower, washing away the cobwebs and dust. Then she set it in the center of the living room. Jennifer moved the Christmas tree several times before she found a use for it. A blizzard of snow is coming, icy winds that can easily exceed 20 kilometers per hour. We're monitoring the cyclone right now. So far, we can only say that residents should stock up on food and can. Who knows how much trouble such bad weather will bring, said the TV announcer. Jennifer heard someone knocking on the gate. She looked out the window and saw the top of a hat. Jennifer walked quickly down the porch steps. She walked out to the gate, and when she opened the gate, she opened her mouth involuntarily. Standing in front of her was her fiancé. Tim was smiling. He was holding the huge bouquet of peonies, which unknown where he had gotten at this time of year. She led him through the gate, and they hugged each other so tightly that their bones nearly cracked. Mate, cried, she would have given anything in the world to see him again, and she hadn't expected him to be here at all. His tears were flowing too. I have new papers, we can be together now. You didn't tell me anything, nothing, he kept repeating. Jennifer apologized and cried until they both calmed down. Half an hour later, they were sitting in the kitchen, both red from crying. On the table was tea in a glass teapot. They drank the tea, and Jennifer told him everything. If his father trusted him, made the papers, sent him here, then Tim could be trusted. The more Jennifer told him, the more Tim was surprised. He was shocked by everything the bride had done, and all she wanted was money. She fell for it, and she got what she deserved. They never parted again. They followed each other around, even showered together. Tim and Jennifer put on Christmas tunes and decorated the tree, which was now flashing with lights. 2 weeks later, they celebrated New Year's Eve together, and they both recognized it as the happiest New Year's Eve of their lives. They set a small table together, uncorked the champagne, and instead of the blue light, which had already gotten old, they watched old New Year's Eve comedies. Jennifer woke up at about 10. When she saw the snow outside the window, she jumped up from her seat and quickly pulled on a tracksuit. She slipped her feet into her warm Uggs and dashed outside. Finally, a really big snowfall. The modern village studded with snow was beautiful. The streets seemed like a fairy tale, thanks to the snow-white blanket that covered the ground. The trees were dressed in fluffy white coats, and roofs of houses were covered with a thick layer of sparkling snow. A festive atmosphere of coziness was in the air. The smell of snow mixed with the aroma of smoke from sad chimneys filled the air. The crunch of snow underfoot added a special charm to this winter day. Snowflakes were slowly falling from the sky, creating a magical atmosphere. The villagers were enjoying the beautiful day, strolling along the snowy streets and admiring the beauty of winter nature. They wished each other a happy new year. Jennifer threw up her hands and shouted her greeting for everyone's happiness. The neighbors also shouted their congratulations. Everyone was laughing with laughter. Olivia felt tears flowing down her cheeks, leaving frost-red paths. How happy she was. However, despite the cold, there was a sense of warmth and comfort that came from the houses and the people living in this village. It was a place where one could forget about the daily hustle and bustle and immerse themselves in the world of a winter fairy tale. Tim walked outside and hugged her from the back. He kissed the top of her head, wrapped her in his arms like a blanket. "Let's go finish our salads," cheerfully, he said. They went back into the house, settled back into the living room. The Christmas tree was blinking, New Year's Eve comedies were on, it had been a terrific day. 3 days later, Jennifer went outside to go to the store. She wanted to walk down the snow-covered street before it all melted. She was surprised when she noticed a letter lying in the mailbox. Jennifer decided to pick it up on her way back, but there wasn't enough patience. Jennifer quickly returned home with the letter. When Tim came out into the living room, he saw Jennifer crying. The man jumped up to her, snatched the letter out of her hands, ran his eyes over it several times. "He's done everything, and I'm free for good now," Jennifer cried. She had received a letter from her father, who had sent not only the letter but also the paperwork to open an account. Not only had he fixed the problem, but he had left so much money that they could both stay out of work for the rest of their lives. And if they didn't go on vacation to some island every month, Jennifer couldn't even imagine what her father had gone to do to make all this happen. She thought of the woods, the car, the threats, and tears came again at the freedom that came over her. She had a roof over her head, freedom paper, a loved one by her side. Jennifer realized there was nothing happier than all of this, and no damn easy money, even if it was millions, it wasn't worth giving it all up. It was the scariest year of her life that ended with a happy ending. But to be honest, Jennifer knew full well that it could have ended much worse. Thank you for joining us today on Deep Stories. Be sure to like and subscribe and hit that notification bell so you don't miss out on our next video.